Hey folks, how's it going? It is Dave, your awesome host for podcast of All Japan Worldwide Fan Group, SUWAMA'S Station. Thank you for joining us. I should correct myself and not say it's us. It should be just we, the royal we. Matt, he is stepping away from this episode, but he will be back for next episode. And so we've been away for a little while, and June, July to August have been some really big months for All Japan in terms of 2021. And we've covered June. So this episode is actually going to go very in-depth with July and August in terms of results of shows related to All Japan talent, as well as news tidbits. We are going to hit this thing like last episode and go in chronological order because it seemed much more efficient that way, so we don't have to backtrack and get lost in certain things. So having said that, we are going to set it up like this. We're going to talk about July, news and results. This is results related to All Japan. So this could be GLEAT, this could be Tenryu Project, this could be All Japan. But All Japan is obviously what we're talking, okay? We are going to take ourselves a quick break, and then we are going to jump into August. And we are going to talk about August news and results. And after that, we are going to talk a little bit about, seems like All Japan and GLEAT are developing a very good working relationship. And it's very beneficial to both sides. But we'll get into that at the end of the episode. So I want to get right into it just because we've got a lot of ground to cover. This episode will get uploaded in September, and we are covering 2 episodes back. So I apologize. However, I think the best way to make up for sorries is to get right to the heart of the matter, which is getting caught up. So let's get to it, okay? On July 2nd, Suwama is announced to return to action on the 11th after recovering from COVID. Suwama was forced to vacate the Triple Crown title right before the scheduled defense against Jake Lee. Instead, we got our Tomoe battle, which was a series of matches between the 3 wrestlers, which would be Yuma, Kento, and Jake Lee. Jake Lee obviously victorious and is now the Triple Crown Heavyweight Champion. On July 8th, the Great Koji versus the Great Muta from 2002 is uploaded onto Battle Library. Battle Library is accessible not only on YouTube, but as well as AJPW.TV. It is a collaboration between Gaora and AJPW.TV. So the significance in this match is that it is one of the rare one-on-one matches between Kojima and Muto. They are in different gimmicks, so it isn't just, Muto versus Kojima. They're using different gimmicks. Kojima is the Great Koji, which is a one-off sort of deal. After that, he becomes the Great Kosuke, which is a mix-up between his gimmick and the Great Sasuke's. And Muta go one-on-one in this match. It is a very interesting time in All Japan just because Muto is just getting in there and he's trying to make All Japan sort of his and make it very different from All Japan that had existed not more than 2 years ago at this point. So it's very interesting. We move on to the also on the 7th, All Japan reports that Shuji Ishikawa and Black Menzore test positive for COVID-19. Tajiri and announcer Okada are quarantined to make sure they are not infected due to close contact with both wrestlers. Neither one would test positive later down the road. Ashino versus Ishikawa is officially off for the 7-11 show to see who would challenge Jake Lee in his first defense. Moving along, also on the 7th, Tenryu Project holds their Survive the Revolution show at Shin Kaiba First Ring. We see some All Japan related activity. Dan Tamada gets the win over Kazumasa Yoshida from BJW with the crab hold at 8:43. Very standard fare of what goes on with rookies. It's typically if there's a win, it's usually a flash hold or a crab hold of some sort. But, it's just to kind of show that they're basic and very much at the bottom of their careers where they only have up to go from there. Hikaru Sato also competes on this show, getting the win over Riona with the capture-style cross-arm breaker at 12:14. On the 9th, All Japan announces the new series to replace the Oduo series, which was placed in the summer. This series is named the Super Deluxe Series. The tour will run from the 7th of September, which will begin at Kurikan Hall, and will run from the 10th at Shimane Kunibiki Messe Multipurpose Hall on September 11th at Yamaguchi Shunan City Shin Nanyo Contact Center, the 12th at Acros Fukuoka, the 16th at Kanagawa Yokohama Hodogaya Auditorium, and back over at Kurikan Hall on the 21st to close it out. On the 10th, All Japan announces that Tajiri and announcer Okuda are being isolated until negative COVID tests are confirmed, and so that we be able to get back into the wrestling rotation with the rest of the crew. Ishikawa and Minzare are still recovering and resting up. They're eventually going to get a good overall checkup a few weeks later, but they're having to go through the motions of having COVID, and I'm sure it really sucked for them. But moving right along, on the 11th, we had Osaka ADN Arena number 2. We had a 10-bell salute for the recently departed Del Wilkes, a.k.a. The Patriot, and Chris Youngblood. Both talents were very much known for their tag exploits in All Japan. Youngblood and Patriot, both of them a part of some killer tag teams. Patriot teaming up with various gaijin, the Mass Gimmicks teaming up with the Eagle, if I'm not mistaken. Jackie Fargo's brother would wind up later being George Hines. The special exhibit was also at the show that had gear, old ring memorabilia of both wrestlers over at the show to commemorate their lives and their participation in All Japan, which will live on for the rest of time. They're both talented wrestlers that have left behind a great wrestling legacy, so rest in peace. But both of them, very talented wrestlers, left behind some talented work. So on the 11th, Quiet Storm, who is a wrestler very much known for spending a fair amount of time in Osaka, as well as spending a fair amount of time in Noah and Japan in general. Quiet Storm and Ryuki Honda get the win over Jun Saito and Rei Saito when he uses Storm, I should say, uses the 50 cm arm lariat on Rei for the win at 7:59. Francesco Akira, Hikaru Sato, and Andy Wu, they team up in a win over Atsuki Aoyagi, Shoichi Yasutaka Oosura from Michinoku Pro when Akira uses a modified cross-face lock on Onisera for the win at 12:24. Yoshitatsu and Takao Omori get the win over Purple Haze's Izanagi and Udamaro at 10:53 by a Omori Axe Bomber. I love the Axe Bomber. What can I say? I'm a big fan of it. Zeus gets the win over Koji Iwamoto at 9:51 with the Jackhammer. Suwama, Shotaro Ashino, and Dan Tamada get the win over Jake Lee, Hokuto Omori, and Yusuke Kodama of Total Eclipse when Ashino taps out Omori with the ankle lock at 15-16. In a World Tag Team title match, Kento and Yuma from Nextream, they go and get the win over Koji Doi and Kuma Arashi of Total Eclipse at 25-41. This is the fourth defense for Nextream. Nextream proving, this iteration of Nextream proving to be maybe the most successful so far, because the talent involved has put on just some amazing matches. Not to say that the other members before have not, but I would definitely say this is a group that is more standout than anything, but led by the leadership of Yuma and Kento. Just fantastic work in this match. Go out of your way and watch this match. On the 12th, Atsuki Aoki Memorial match gets announced for the end of the tour. King Tani, Shuhei Taniguchi from Noah, will join with Suwama and Hikaru Sato to take on Takuya Wada, Sushi, and Yuma Aoyagi on the 22nd. Moving right along, on the 13th, All Japan has a show at Shinkaiba. Hikaru Sato, Dan Tamura of Evolution, they get the win over the rookies Dei Saito and Jun Saito when Sato uses the cross arm breaker on Dei at 10:09 for the win. Takao Mori and Koji Yamamoto get the win over Yoshitatsu and Shikata of Yoshitatsu Kingdom when Omori uses the Axe Bomber on Shikata at 9:48. Ryuki Honda gets his 5th trial match in his series that basically will display some of the best work that he will establish as a rookie before he will move on. Zeus gets the win over Ryuki Honda at 8:19 with his face lock. All Japan World Junior Heavyweight Title skirmish match. Izanagi, Yusuke Kodama, and Sugi get the win over Francesco Akira, Atsuki Aoyagi, and Rising Hayato when Sugi uses the Firebird Splash on Hayato at 9:46. Kento and Yuma of Nextream get the win over Kuma Arashi and Okuto Omori of Total Eclipse when Aoyagi uses the Japanese leg roll clutch on Omori for the win at 15:50. In a Triple Crown skirmish to build up for the title match coming up, Suwama and Shotaro Ashino get the win over Jake Lee and Koji Doi of Total Eclipse when Ashino uses the ankle hold on Lee to tap him out at 19:26. Moving right along, on the 14th, a very special Triple Crown title match is uploaded to Battle Library. Masahiro Chono, in only his 4th appearance in All Japan, challenges Keiji Muto for the Triple Crown title. It is the clash of 2 New Japan stars for All Japan's top title. These two have a long history, very long history, that would come to an abrupt stop for the moment in 2002 when Muto would defect full-time to All Japan. On the 14th, also, All Japan announces formally that Ashino and Lee will go on 7/22, as well as Koji Iwamoto going up against the Supernova, the ace of All Japan, Keto Miyahara, in a special singles match. Moving along, on the 18th, at Narita View Hotel, we had Takao Mori and Osamu Nishimura, the Nish, as I like to call him, go up and get a win over Jun Saito and Rei Saito, the Saito brothers, when Omori would use a single leg crab at 7:44. Francesco Akira would get the win over Atsuki Aoyagi at 7:30 with Yutaka. Zeus and Izanagi of Purple Haze get the win over Yoshitatsu and Takatoshi Matsumoto when Zeus uses the jackhammer on Matsumoto at 9:58. Suwama gets the win over Yusuke Kodama with the backdrop suplex at 11:21. Kento and Yuma get the win over Koji Iwamoto and Ryuki Honda at 10:50 when Kento uses the shutdown German suplex on Honda. And the main event, Jake Lee and Hokuto Omori of Total Eclipse get the win over Shotaro Shino and Dan Tamura of Evolution when Lee uses the D4C on Tamura for the win at 18:45. On July 20th, it is announced that Okuda and Tajiri are both COVID-free and will be returning on the 22nd. On the 21st, Toshiaki Kawada versus Keiji Muto from February of 2002 will be uploaded to the Battle Library. Kawada at this point had been bested before in the past by Muto in the previous year and was looking to get revenge and reclaim the top title in All Japan as he rightfully deserved it. Muto would wind up losing the title to Kawada on that match. However, Kawada would wind up suffering a knee injury not too long afterwards and have to vacate the title. Kawada would not get the title back for not more than a couple of months, and then he would get his record-breaking, record-setting Triple Crown title reign from 2003 all the way to 2005. At Kirken Hall on July 22nd, we had a brand new All Japan wrestler debut, Ryoma Tsukamoto, who is a Hamaguchi Dojo trainee, which is very good pedigree. He debuts in a six-man tag. Takao Mori, Osamu Nishimura, The Nish, and Ryuji Honda get the win over the Saito brothers and Ryoma Tsukamoto, when traditionally Tsukamoto takes the loss over Omori. Omori taps out Tsukamoto with the single leg crab at 7-12. Ryuki Honda and Dan Tamura of Evolution get the win over Atsuki Aoyagi and Rising Hayato from Next Stream when Honda uses a German suplex on Aoyagi at 6:28. In a six-man tag title match, the AJPW.TV six-man tag team titles, Yoshitatsu, Seigo Tachibana, and Karel Ito, this very strange contingent, go and get the win over Total Eclipse, taking their gold away. Tajiri, Hokuto, and Yusuke Kodama when Tachibana uses a Ebesu drop on Omori at 8:58 in their very first challenge for the titles and Total Eclipse's very first defense of the tag titles. They are now the third champions. Seigo in his very first match back, proving that he has some fight left in him from his days of being a very, very, very much discussed and very much promoted by a fair amount of Wrestle One fans, the potential that Tachibana has. And I can see it when he wrestled in this match. The All-Asian Tag Team titles were up for grabs when Zeus and Izanagi of Purple Haze took on El Lindemann and Issei Onitsuka of GLEAT and Strong Hearts. Zeus and Izanagi get the win over Strong Hearts at 10:22 when Izanagi uses his inside cradle on Onitsuka for their sixth defense. Zeus and Izanagi continuing to show why they are the most dominant tag team as far as a junior heavyweight combination tag team, as well as the most successful and consistently winning tag team in All Japan for the last year. So let's remember that. If they wind up showing up in the Real World Tag League, don't be surprised. Kento gets the win over Koji Iwamoto with the shutdown German suplex at 11:07. In the memorial match for Atsuki Aoyagi, our dearly departed friend, talented wrestler, proud representative of All Japan. Atsuki Aoki Memorial Match. Suwama Hikaru Sato, King Tani get the win over Yuma Aoyagi, Takuya Wada, and Sushi at 14:06 when Suwama used the backdrop suplex on Sushi for the win. In the World Junior Heavyweight title match, we saw Sugi upset Junior Heavyweight Champion and Junior Battle of Glory winner Francesco Akira with the Shooting Star Press for the win and becoming the 57th champion. Francesco Akira losing in his first title defense. Jake Lee going up against Shotaro Ashino to defend the Triple Crown Heavyweight Championship. It would be a match that most folks would write off, but it was fantastic. Gotta watch this. Gotta watch this match. Simply put, you gotta watch this match. Ashino comes under his own here. Moving right along, we had some All Japan participation on the GLEAT show that was in Azalea Taisho Hall on the 25th, and this show is available in its entirety on YouTube. GLEAT has that going on for them. All their shows have been available on YouTube, at least a vast majority of them. In the third match, we saw Yu Iizuka, formerly of Hida, team up with Atsuki Aoyagi, getting the win over Takanori Ito and Jun Masaoka when Iizuka used a buzzsaw kick on Masaoka at 13:18. On July 27th, Black Menzode and Shuji Ishikawa have been officially announced as coming back with negative COVID tests, allowing them to return soon. Ishikawa did not have to vacate his Gaora TV title and at this point has no current challengers. July 28th, Battle Library uploads the follow-up match between Kawada and Muto from 2003. 0-1 Kingpin and New Japan legend Shinya Hashimoto is holding the Triple Crown Heavyweight Championship, having taken it from Muto earlier in the year. And Muto Kawada hook up for another fantastic singles match to decide who is going to challenge Hashimoto later in the summer. Oddly enough, Kawada does not get to face Hashimoto for the title. Instead, he enters into a tournament to crown a new champion as Hashimoto gets injured and vacates over the summer. Shinjiro Otani would meet Kawada for the title. Otani, a representative of 0-1. Of course, Otani competed earlier this year in the Champions Carnival, still showing that he's got what it takes to have some damn good wrestling matches. On a Tenryu Project show, Survive the Revolution on the 28th, Shin Kaiba First Ring, Dan Tamura and Duki Honda of All Japan get the win in the opener over Leona and Atsuki Aoyagi when Honda used a German suplex on Aoyagi at 10-11. And also on this show, we had a 2 out of 3 falls match between Minoru Suzuki, Masada, and Hikaru Sato when they get their win over Masayuki Kono, Hub, and Keita Yano when Sato gets the win for their team. 2 wins over 1. Sato gets the first win over Yano with the cross arm breaker at 29:51. Yano gets the win over Sato at 10:14. And Suzuki gets the win over Yano with a Gotch-style pile driver at 9:33. That does it for the results for July. We're going to take ourselves a quick break. We're going to come right back, hit it with August. We are going to have ourselves an interview with Joseph Montecillo, who is the man behind the awesome Walking the King's Road YouTube series. I'm sure a lot of folks are really into the YouTube user content. It's fantastic stuff. If you haven't watched it, go and check it out. We're going to have that interview after we get done with July and August results. So we'll be right back. And we are back. Thank you for joining us. This is SUWAMA'S Station, the official podcast of All Japan Worldwide Fan Group. I am Dave the Drummer, your awesome host. Matt will be back with us next month, and we are talking about All Japan catching up from July to August, which is where we're at. So let's get right back into the mix of things. August 4th, Kawada versus Sasaki from 2005 for the Triple Crown is uploaded to the Battle Library. At this point in time, Kawada is just getting to the end of his legendary and record-setting title reign, sitting at the top of All Japan's heavyweight division. Sasaki has only been around All Japan for the last year, but he is hungry to become the next man in a rare club to be not just IWGP heavyweight champ, but also winning All Japan's top title. Also on the 4th, we had some more All Japan participation on a GLEAT show. CIMA Shigehiro EDA of Purple Haze. Interestingly, we have two factions cooperating, although some folks don't know that EDA is technically a part of Strong Hearts, but either way, Koji Yamamoto of All Japan team up when they get the win over Kaz Hayashi, Daijiro Matsui, and Jun Masaoka, when Yamamoto gets the win over Masaoka with the Koko no Gejetsu at 14:20. On the 5th, director Toshiki Toeda was announced to have been positively tested for COVID-19. All Japan enacted its standard protocol to best handle the situation and isolate Toeda, and also trace to see if anybody was infected from contact being around him. On the 12th, Kojima versus Kawada from 2005, the Triple Crown title match would see Kojima obtain the Triple Crown heavyweight title. Kojima is the only man in history to have the IWGP heavyweight title and the Triple Crown heavyweight title at the same time. That happens not very long from now, but this is part one of Kojima's ascension to what some would say is being a legend in Japanese pro wrestling history, if not pro wrestling history. But Kawada would drop the title to Kojima right before he would start working almost exclusively after a while for Dream Stage Entertainment, aka Hustle, which would also own 01. Eventually, Kawada would win the World Heavyweight title in 01 and start working in New Japan before he would close out his career. Kojima would stay on top of the All Japan heavyweight scene until his exit in 2010 back to New Japan. On the 15th, we had an All Japan show at Shinjuku Face that would start up the Oudou Tournament, the 8th annual Oudou Tournament. On the 15th, we had a doubleheader, very, very unpredictable, and a lot of fun. If you caught both of them, I think you very much enjoyed them, and if not, go out of your way and check out both days because they were pretty good events. Both events on the same day. On the very first match, we saw Shuji Ishikawa get the win over Jun Saito at 4:21 with the running knee lift. We saw Hayato Yoshida from 2AW, no stranger to All Japan, get the win over Black Menzode at 7:20. We saw Zeus get the win over Seigo Tachibana with the face lock to advance in the tournament at 6:41. We saw Atsuki Aoyagi get the hugest upset in his career, getting the win over Takao Mori at 9:21 with a cradle. We saw T-Hawk representing GLEAT and Strong Hearts, get the win over Rising Hayato at 10:37 with the Night Ride. Rising Hayato, of course, of Next Stream. This match just continuing their rivalry from earlier in the year. Hayato and T-Hawk had met in tag action on a Ehime Pro Wrestling event. Ehime Pro Wrestling, of course, is where Hayato is based out of. Kento Miyahara gets the win over Yusuke Kodama with the shutdown German suplex at 12:31 to advance. And we had Shigehiro Irie get the win over Kuma Arashi at 11:13 with the Beast Bomber to close out the show. Jake Lee gets the win over Sugi in the battle of the Triple Crown versus the World Junior Heavyweight Championships. 12:36, Jake Lee gets the win with the D4C. Moving on to the second part of the doubleheader, we had Suwama get the win over Dei Saito at 3:03 with the lariat. We saw Francesco Akira bounce back from his loss of the junior heavyweight title at 8:45 with a win over Izanagi with Yutaka at 8:45. We saw Hokuto Omori get the win over Ryuki Honda at 13:21 with the Muso Easton, showing that Omori is definitely still above grade-wise Honda, even if Honda is a bit bigger than he is. Tajiri gets the win over Devil Murasaki at 2:54 with the crucifix hold. Yoshitatsu gets the win over Hikaru Sato with the Yoshitatsu Fantasy at 8:24. Abdullah Kobayashi of BJW gets the win over Don Tamura with the Bakachinka Sleeper at 9:14. Koji Iwamoto gets the win over Koji Doi in a huge upset when Iwamoto uses the Koko no Gejetsu at 11:53, arguably one of the biggest wins of Koji Iwamoto's career. Shotaro Ashino gets the win over Yuma Aoyagi in arguably the best match of the very first round of the Oudou Tournament when Yuma gets pinned after a T-bone suplex at 16:46 to close out the first round of the Oudou Tournament. Moving along to the second round, which started at Hodogaya Public Hall on the 18th. Yuma Aoyagi, Ryuki Honda, Jun Saito, Rei Saito, Ryoma Tsukamoto get the win over Takao Mori, Izanagi, Black Minezore, Dan Tamura, and Devil Murasaki when Honda used a spear on Murasaki at 8:17. Atsuki Aoyagi gets the win over Tajiri with the Samson clutch at 7:58. We saw Shuji Ishikawa get the win over Francesco Akira with the air scissors drop or the Luthez hold at 5:05. Shigehiro Irie gets the win over Yoshitatsu at 5:32 with the Yoshitatsu Illusion. We saw Ayato Yoshida get the win over Okuto Omori with the backdrop suplex at 7:34. We saw Shotaro Shino get the win over Zeus with the ankle lock at 9:43 for a surprise win. Suwama gets the win over Abdullah Kobayashi at 10:23 with the Manriki Sleeper, which he's put down a very good amount of wrestlers in singles competition, especially tournaments with. Kento gets the win over T-Hawk, who had been gloating and sort of trying to get a rise out of Kento, sort of throw him off his game. Kento gets the win over T-Hawk with the shutdown German suplex at 14:15. And to close out the second round, Jake Lee gets the win over Koji Iwamoto, the former All-Asian Tag Team Champions, former members of Jin and Sweeper, going up against each other in the main event when Jake Lee gets the win with the D4C at 13:21. On the 18th, former World Junior Heavyweight Champion and All Japan fixture of the last 2 years, scouted by Tajiri, Akira announces that he will be returning to Europe where he can finally see his family and dog, which we had been talking about before in interviews previous to. Akira has been in Japan for almost 2 years and has been looking forward to going home for some time. 3 days later from this announcement, WXW, based in Germany, would announce that Akira, he would be competing on their Catch Grand Prix tournament, which I'm sure Akira is very ecstatic about to have this opportunity. WX is a very, very fantastic promotion to watch, and I think is something that raises the value of talent raises the value of wrestling in Germany and in Europe. On the 19th, Kawada and then FMW booker promoter, former All Japan wrestler and Kawada's former tag partner, Koto Fuyuki, a.k.a. Sansom Fuyuki, when they were a part of the Revolution stable. They were the tag team known as Footloose, and this match is from 2001. It is uploaded to the Battle Library. It is a series of matches between All Japan and War wrestlers led by Genichiro Tenryu. Tenryu would later turn on Fuyuki during the Real World Tag League of that year, citing Fuyuki was plotting with Kawada to return to their Footloose tag team. On the 20th of August, All Japan officially announces on that Oda War Gym will host the Second Champions Night on October 16th. Also announced that day is some dates for the annual Raising an Army series, which starts off on the 6th at Shinkaiba on First Ring, goes to Saitama Kitamoto City Sports Center on the 9th, 22nd at Kanagawa Shinkuri, and on the 31st at Kurikan Hall. Moving along, on the 21st, Hikaru Sato had a hard-hit show to celebrate his 21st and a half anniversary of being a pro wrestler at Fujitsu Stadium, Kawasaki, subtitled Midsummer Metamorphosis Festival. Now, Sato was very adamant that he would compete on as many matches as he could on this show to really show that he was deeply involved with Hard Hit. It's sort of been his project for a while. It started out in DDT, and when he left DDT, he kind of took it with him. So let's get through it. Very active amount of participation from All Japan on this show. Start with the opener, Tyson Meguchi pro wrestling debut match. Atsuki Aoyagi and Ryoki Honda of All Japan get the win over Hikaru Sato and Tyson Meguchi when Honda used the crab hold on Meguchi at 9:50 for the win. The second match saw a hard hit rules 5 lost points match. Hikaru Sato and Takatoshi Matsumoto get the win over Kohei Tokeshi and Tatsuya Izuchi from Heat Up get a draw over on this match. It goes to a time limit draw at 15 minutes. YMZ versus Basada, Pro Wrestling Basada, rivalry from hell in Hana Yamato Mata Oni match. Sagat Daiki Shimamura and Takato Nakano from Pro Wrestling Basada get the win over Hikaru Sato, Kaori Yaoyama, and Best Stretch Man, also from Pro Wrestling Basada, when Shimamura used the Swanton Bomb on Stretch Man for the win at 11:24. Jeep offer 5-way tag match. This is the bizarre series of matches involving the musician Jeep, Koji Doi, and Please Aben, who I would have to take a guess is Fuminori Abe from Pro Wrestling Basada, get the win over Nakun. Sona Hikarude Sato, you can take a guess, that's Hikaru Sato, and Sushi ni Kaoru, and Junko Francesco and Junko Bailan, and Tsuyoshi Okada and Masuguna Tamura no Kachan, which I'm going to take a guess is Kiyoshi Tamura, and Kikutaro Ichirin no Hane and Tomodachi ga Futota Kobashi at 14:12 when Doi used a lariat at 14:12 on Sushi. On an IGFF rules match, Hikaru Sato versus Akira Joe went to a time limit draw at 15 minutes. We saw Sawama Sushi Dantamura get the win over Shuji Ishikawa. Suwama Sushi and Dantamura get the win over Shuji Ishikawa, Jun Saito, and Rei Saito at 17:24. With Suwama used a lariat on Rei at 17:24 for the win. At a Fujitsu Stadium Kawasaki official weapon bringing anywhere fall rules match, Isami Kodaka of Pro Wrestling Basada, who is also a former All-Asian Tag Team Champion, and Fuminori Abe, who's also from Pro Wrestling Basada, who has challenged for the World Junior Heavyweight title earlier in the year, with Hiroshi Yamato get the win over Hikaru Sato and Takayuki Ueki, with Kohei Takeshi when Abe used a cradle on Sato for the win. This is the first interaction of the tag team that is Sato and Yamato, who were teaming up and also rivals at the same time in All Japan in 2012 and 2013. Very interesting to see them interact after all this time, almost 10 years plus. In a current Blast death match, Atsushi Onita, who is a All Japan legend by this point, simply because he is so legendary, known from his FMW days, but also because he was the wrestler that was supposed to take over the junior heavyweight wave of All Japan, but seemingly that kind of fell apart. Yoshitatsu and Naoshi Sano get the win over Hideki Sakin and Takuya Wada and Takehiro Tababa at 11:31 when Onita used the current Blast bat at Tababa at 11:31. And in the main event, Dio Kamamura faced Minato Suzuki and lost, pinned after a Gotch-style piledriver at 18:34. Moving back to All Japan results. We had a show on the 24th that saw the third round of the Oudou Tournament at Shinkaiba. Yoshitatsu gets the win over Dioma Tsukamoto with the crab hold at 6:45. Tajiri and Okuto Omori of Total Eclipse get the win over Jun Saito and Rei Saito when they got cradled by Omori at 6:11. Yuma Aoyagi, Koji Yamamoto, Izanagi, and Francesco Akira get the win over Takao Omori, Black Menzore, Dan Tamura, and Ryuki Honda when Yamamoto uses the Koko no Gajetsu on Tamura at 5:57. In the third round of the Oudou Tournament, Shotaro Ashino gets the win over Atsuki Aoyagi at 9:52 with the T-Bone suplex. Suwama gets the win over Shigehiro Irie at 13:05 with the Manriki Sleeper. We should mention that Ashino gets the win over Atsuki at 9:52. Jake Lee gets the win over his former stablemate and Jin, Ayato Yoshida, at 14:32 with the D4C to advance. And finally, Kento Miyahara gets the win over Shuji Ishikawa when he uses a front cradle on Ishikawa to get the win at 22:06. Moving along to the 25th, we saw Ryuki Honda get the win over Rei Saito in the Tenryu Project opener Survive the Revolution Volume 9 at Shinkaiba First Ring on the 25th. Also, the card is announced for the Oudou Tournament final show on the 29th at Korakuen Hall. That will see Jun Saito versus Dioma Tsukamoto in the opener. Semi-final will see Suwama versus Kento. Also, Jake Lee versus Shotaro Ashino. We see a tag match with Koji Yamamoto and Ryuki Honda team up against Hikaru Sato and Dan Tamura. In 10-man tag action, we will see Shuji Ishikawa, Takao Omori, Rei Saito, Abdullah Kobayashi, and Ryuji Hishikata go up against Total Eclipse's Tajiri Hokuto Omori, Koji Doi, Kumarashi, and Yusuke Kodama. In 6-man tag action, we will see Purple Haze's Zeus Izanagi and Devil Murasaki go up against Yoshitatsu, returning T-Hawk and Sega Tachibana. In six-man tag action, we will see Yuma Aoyagi, Atsuki Aoyagi, and Daisuke Hayato from Nextreme go up against Black Menzore Sugi and Francesco Akira. And in the main event, we will see the semifinals winner go up against each other in the finals to decide who will become the next challenger for the Triple Crown Heavyweight Championship. On the same day, it is announced that Atsuki Aoyagi will challenge Sugi for the World Junior Heavyweight title on September 7th after his great showing in the Oudou Tournament, making it all the way to the semifinals. T-Hawk and Kohei Sato are also announced for the 7th. Also on the 25th, the All Japan Battle Library uploads a special All Asian Tag Team title match as Satoshi Kojima and Kaz Hayashi's rise as a tag team begins with their challenging Mr. Ganosuke and Tetsuhiro Kuroda formerly of FMW and Team No Respect, who managed to win the titles outside of All Japan. Kosuke and Shiryu are looking to bring the titles back to All Japan. This match is definitely worth a watch. On the 27th, All Japan announces the cancellation of one of the dates on the Super Deluxe series in October. The 9/11 show is axed after some issues or complications arise. All Japan will continue with the rest of the dates on the tour. So, moving along onto the 30th, the Super Deluxe Series opener is announced as Sugi versus Aoyagi, T-Hawk and Lindemann versus Zeus and Izanagi, the Twin Towers versus Honda and Iwamoto, and Extreme versus Wama and Shotaro Ashino. On August 30th, Super Deluxe Series opener is announced with Sugi versus Aoyagi for the World Junior Heavyweight title, T-Hawk and Lindemann versus Zeus and Izanagi for the All Asian Tag Belts, Twin Towers versus Honda and Iwamoto, and the match of the evening more than likely will go to Nextreme versus Wama and Shotaro Ashino for the World Tag Team title belts. On the 30th, Atsuki Aoyagi is announced to represent All Japan on a special Legacy Wrestling show where he will complete in a battle royal against Ryuji Kawakami, Onryo, Isami Kodaka, Yashi, Kudangan Mask, Den Ayabe, Shota, Yuki Ishikawa, Masao Inoue, Toru, Masayuki Kono, Tiger Doorway, Yutaka Yoshie, Atsuki Aoyagi, of course, as mentioned, Shuki Kitamura, Masaki Mochizuki, and Yuki Lino are all announced to be participating on the Battle Royal. Also announced on the 30th is a special tag match with Jake Lee and Hokuto Omori versus Suwama and Dan Tamura, a offer match from All Japan Pro Wrestling for this show. On the 30th, All Japan holds a press conference to announce the Super Deluxe Series opener for all those tag matches. Shuji Ishikawa is also announced to defend the Gaora TV title against Takao Omori on September 12th at Akuros Fukuoka. Omori made mention that during the press conference that he needed this title win, wants to win the Gaora TV very badly to cap off the 30th anniversary of his pro wrestling career. Jake versus Suwama is officially announced for the 21st for the Triple Crown title match. Also on the 30th, MLW posts on Twitter and social media that Tajiri is coming over to work some dates for them. It is the first time Tajiri has worked in the U.S. for a company in the United States since his time in the WWE before leaving back to Japan. All Japan and MLW have had ties in the past. Former MLW World Champion Satoshi Kojima won the title through his working agreement with MLW while he was a All Japan talent. This could very much open up some big doors for both promotions. Tajiri will appear on October 2nd for MLW for MLW's Fightland event. Court Bauer also invited Jake Lee to defend the Triple Crown heavyweight title in MLW. So, we've gotten through August, and we're kicking butt, guys. We are getting everything sorted out and taken care of. We're going to take ourselves a quick break. We're going to come right back. We are going to get to our interview with Joseph Montecillo, and then we're going to finish it up with a little talk about the seemingly new and improved working relationship with GLEAT and All Japan. This is Dave, your awesome host for SUWAMA'S Station. We will be right back. Please enjoy this musical selection. Alright, we are back. So, as some of you have either checked out the videos or you've heard of the name, Walking the King's Road is this fantastic YouTube series where Joseph goes in depth with some of the most crucial storylines, feuds, sagas of All Japan during its heydays, during the time that folks most treasure All Japan and the wrestling representative of the time. And so I thought it would be great to have Joseph on the show. When I had taken a look at some of your work, I was like, I got to get this guy on the show. I got to talk with this guy because I am somebody that is very curious about what kind of goes on in, people in terms of they're enjoying wrestling, and one day it just kind of comes to them. I want to make some original content, putting my creative output out there for people to check out and putting it towards pro wrestling. I mean, because a lot of people have a lot of things that they kind of pour themselves into, but to be able to go and say, I want to make a YouTube series of videos regarding the 90s classics, All Japan, So tell us about yourself, Joseph.
Well, yeah, I've been a wrestling fan since I was a kid, roughly around 2006. So 2006, I was drawn in by Edge and Lita promising to have sex on WWE Raw. No lie, that's where it started. It's awful, I know, but that's the truth of it. And I've just kind of been obsessed ever since. I never really grew out of it the way a lot of people my age who grew up with wrestling in the Philippines in the 2000s did. I just always kind of stuck with it and kept discovering new facets of it, new promotions, new wrestlers, and it's just one of those things now that it's just a genuinely huge part of my life in ways that I could never even have imagined back then. And yeah, currently I'm running my YouTube channel where I post different videos, different video essays about whatever particular piece of pro wrestling interests me. And most people who follow the channel or who are aware of my work will probably know me for the Walking the King's Road series, where I talk about 90s and some late 80s, a few pieces of the late 80s of All Japan, which is, pretty much considered as kind of the consensus, one of the greatest eras of any company in pro wrestling ever. So that's where I'm at right now.
Right on, man. Right on. So you said you were a wrestling fan since you were younger, right? Like a fair amount
Hmm.
of us, probably are. So when did you get into the Japanese stuff? Like, just any promotion. When did you first get exposed to that? Could you take us to there?
Right, that must have been around 2009, I
Mm-hmm.
want to say. So I would have been watching wrestling for about 3 years at that point. And around 2009, I was really starting to get into kind of like the online side of fandom. Like I was discovering message boards, and this was sort of the advent of the YouTube wrestling sphere. Like it was very small, very concentrated, but it was very kind of this very vocal sphere of pro wrestling content on YouTube, where you had these critics, these reviewers who would post like reviews of full shows, DVDs, and that's how I was exposed to things like independent wrestling in the States, and of course Japanese pro wrestling through that. And I think the gateway that really opened it up to me was this guy named Truth Slayer. He was one of the biggest names on wrestling YouTube at the time. He was basically the name in wrestling YouTube at the time. And he posted a review of a DVD compilation of the best matches of the Holy Demon Army. And uh, what he would do is that he would have the match listing in his video description, and you could see the star ratings he would give it. And it was just raining stars. It was like 4.5, just 5-star matches, just stacks of them. And I was like, oh my God, what is this? That's crazy. Why is there like 12 5-star matches on this thing? And that's sort of how I started digging in to Japanese wrestling. I would look for the matches that were listed in those reviews, and those would lead me to other matches and more message boards, kind of just learning about this stuff, finding more wrestling out there. And that's sort of how it started. It's just a few reviews on YouTube.
Did you get a chance to, at around that time, like, because I'm trying to remember if there was any Japanese wrestlers that were competing in a North American-based company, say TNA or Impact, WWE. I'm trying to think anybody else who really had like a big TV deal going on besides those two until, AEW, because I'm kind of drawing a blank. But were there, I'm trying to think if, who would have been, maybe Kenta Suzuki and maybe WWE. But my main question is did you see any Japanese, or do you recall any Japanese wrestlers working in like big companies in North America that like stood out to you?
At the time, probably not. Like when I was starting out in like '06, '07,
Hmm.
probably not. The best you would have gotten from me would probably be Tajiri.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm not even sure
uh,
if he was around at that point though. I think he had already split back to Japan, but I could be wrong.
I think he was probably gone by the time I'd started watching wrestling in
Right.
'06.
Okay.
But I was definitely the way wrestling TV worked here is that at the time, local cable stations would air reruns of pay-per-views from the past 3, 4 years before the current one. So I would see pay-per-views from '05, '04, '03. So I would be exposed to someone like Tajiri, who was kind of a feature on the mid-card of SmackDown in the early 2000s. And that's probably my very first direct exposure to a Japanese pro wrestler.
Okay.
And yeah, he would have been the one who stood out in my memory. And of course, I would play the video games like SmackDown versus Raw and stuff. And Tajiri was usually featured on those, so I
Yeah.
enjoyed using Tajiri then. Yeah.
Right on. The reason I asked is because at the time when I was growing up in the early 80s, um, there were Japanese wrestlers that were competing in NWA, AWA, WWF that you were exposed to, but you didn't really know their background. They kind of just, showed up, and sometimes you'd get lucky, and they would give kind of a back, the backstory to these guys. Somebody like Killer Khan, who was wrestling in WWF in '87, right? You didn't really need too much of a story for that guy. He's
Mm-hmm.
huge, right? Just huge. He was only around for maybe less than a year, and he was a big imposing guy, so that would totally work. But at the time, the wrestlers that really stuck out, not just sticking out in terms of just they were world class, like nothing you'd seen, is Muda and Liger, right? Muda and
Right.
Liger back in the NWA WCW days. I mean, they really were coming into WCW's house and setting everything on fire, and Liger and Muda did that. I mean, I honestly think one of the biggest what ifs is if Muda had gotten an NWA world title reign. That probably would have drove up his asking price in terms of wherever he went after that. If he had become NWA world champion in by the end of his first run, right? That's huge, right?
Sure. That
Um,
was like 89,
right.
roughly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Liger, same thing. I mean, he did win the WCW light heavyweight title or whatever it was called, but he really kind of tapers off after that. That first year run with WCW, he will come back as like a special guest, but I think the WCW Cruiserweight division, even though they didn't really need Liger, I think it would have been a really big thing if Liger were to have been around more than, say, a handful of matches from say like 94 to like 99.
Yeah, for sure.
Only a handful of matches he did, but that first run, he's there. He's mixing it up with like Brad Armstrong and Brian Pillman and just having these phenomenal matches. But both of these guys so good that you were just like taken in, right? And so that's what kind of was, made me curious about if there was anybody on TV in the Philippines that was like, oh yeah, I remember seeing this guy, like Kenzo Suzuki or whoever. But anyways,
No, not when I was watching. And there's actually a really interesting connection there. You brought up Muda,
yeah.
and something that a lot of people don't know is that the Great Muda's gimmick has a direct line to one of the very first Filipino wrestling superstars ever.
Oh, okay, I'm listening.
Yeah. Uh, his name was Ray Urbano,
Uh-huh.
and he was known primarily for the gimmick as the Great Kabuki, which is Kabooki.
Right.
And then after him, there was another Kabuki, and then Muda kind of took over from that one. So, yeah, Muda's gimmick, that persona that we all know so well from, like, still today, still wrestling as Muda, it strangely has its ties to a Filipino pro wrestler who was kind of presented as a Japanese superstar. So I've always had this YouTube channel, like, since I was really young. I think I opened it in like 5th grade just because that's when YouTube was being introduced to my life, and I just kind of had to have an account on it. And I would post some, just whatever on it, just like silly stuff that kids do, like weird skits that came into my head. And then as I grew older in like late grade school, early high school, I got really into a lot of different YouTube content creators. Like a lot of kids my age, I grew up watching people like the Angry Video Game Nerd
Right.
or the Nostalgia Critic, right? Back when it was okay to say you liked the Nostalgia Critic. I grew up watching that, and from there I kind of branched out and discovered all these different creators. And eventually, by the time I got to college, there was like a new crop of creators. And like the big YouTube creators that I was really following at that time were people like Lindsay Ellis and Every Frame a Painting, who used to do what they called video essays. And they would just pick apart movie scenes, the craft of movie scenes. And I was like, this is great. This is really like interesting stuff. It's always fascinating to hear people with that kind of knowledge pick apart something that they're passionate about. And I've always been a copycat. Like creatively, I'll just see something that I enjoy, and in my head, I'll be like, you know what, I can do that. And for this, I was like, okay, I'll just do that. But I'm not a huge movie nut. But what I do love and what I am obsessed with is wrestling. So I decided I'll do it with pro wrestling.
You had the YouTube channel before, and
Hmm.
then you get to Walking the King's Road. First off, let me ask you this: what what came first, the chicken or the egg, in terms of Walking the King's Road and the year in wrestling review that you do?
Right. So it was Walking the King's Road first,
Okay.
just because I love All Japan, and that's not some creative take. Every every wrestling fan who's ever been on the internet has been told to watch 90s All Japan. They've all checked it out, and most people will generally enjoy what they see because it's fantastic. It's such amazing quality. And I just really wanted to talk about it because it was some of my favorite wrestling ever. And I knew that I couldn't do it in just one video. I couldn't do just one match because so much of what made it so great was the history and how it compounded and how it built across all this time. So I knew that if I was going to do it, I had to do it step by step and just kind of follow that chronology and learn it for myself because I'd never seen it chronologically. And
Right.
I feel like you lose so much not doing it chronologically. Like if you're cherry picking from people's recommendations, you're going to enjoy the surface level because it's excellent wrestling all throughout the 90s. But once you do it all in order and you see how these things progress, it really comes it really becomes clear why it's so beloved, how they're able to tell these stories for so long, how they're able to pay off these things that they've been building up for years on end and seeing these characters develop. And it's still an ongoing process for me now. It's me learning that era as I rediscover it in order and then just kind of sharing what I've discovered, what I thought to people through the channel, through the videos. And that's really what it's become about since I've started those videos.
Myself and I believe it was Roy Lucier, we were talking about context, and
Hmm.
we were talking about the Ishingun JPW invasion that happens in the early to mid 80s, right? And we were kind of explaining exactly as you put it, is people will be able to enjoy the recommendations on a surface level, but to really get the full appreciation of what is going on at the time, you got to be able to kind of look at it from a whole perspective. You know, like this is a match, sure, and all these matches are unique and they all tell their own different stories, but sometimes maybe somebody's coming in and they are, the bad knee, Kobashi with his knees getting wrapped,
Hmm.
somebody with bruised, ribs, somebody not working at 100%, and maybe during the tour, somebody that they're facing really kind of laid into those weaknesses to make sure that when it
Yes.
came to the big title match, they like, I worked on, Masawa's ribs, or I worked on, Kobashi's knees, so that, when it comes time to just chip away, I'm Kawada and I chip away at his legs. Maybe some matches, he could, stand up a little better, but maybe some other matches he can't because his knees are already shot, getting beat up by Kawada and Taue, during the tour, things like that. It's very important to get the appreciation of not just what is going on in that match, but what's going on in a collective sense in the pro wrestling world. Uh, you kind of get a bit more out of it if you know the context of what's going on, if you know the background. It's one of the first tag leagues where you're going to see Kawada and Taue be constantly showing up, the good chunk of the year. They might have their ups and downs, but when it comes to the real world tag league, that's like that's when they shine, right? Their spotlight, that's their specialty. They're like the tag team, the real world tag league. Every year in the 90s that they're in it, they are always the threat because they are so good at winning that, right? Knowing those kind of things, seeing those kind of things really gets the enjoyment levels up because now you kind of are fully immersed as to what's going on. So I'm not surprised to hear you kind of come from that base, because I feel you. I feel you exactly, right there. So next question is, you had mentioned that, if I'm not mistaken, you were talking about you're getting into wrestling. It's like 2006, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what kind of Japanese stuff were you seeing at the time? Like, is there anything specific that stands out? Any All Japan at that time that you got exposed to?
Not until 2009, no.
Okay.
It was through those reviews that I really discovered Japanese wrestling, and that Japanese wrestling was a thing, you
Mm.
know. When I'd seen Tajiri, he was just a Japanese wrestler in the WWE, but I didn't know that there was such a thing as Japanese wrestling.
Yeah.
It was through those videos and because I was getting into the US indie scene, that's when I really discovered that there was like a whole different ecosystem of pro wrestling happening on the other side of the world. And because of that, because of me watching a lot of Ring of Honor in the mid to late 2000s, the Japanese wrestling that I was most exposed to at the time was Pro Wrestling Noah. Like, because they would always be sending Kenta, they'd send Naomichi Marufuji over, and because they were in the promotions that I was watching, that's how I knew about Pro Wrestling Noah. And of course, through Pro Wrestling Noah, it had such deep roots and connections to All Japan in the 90s. It sort of snowballed from there that I kind of just knew these particular pieces of Japanese pro wrestling at the time.
Right. I do remember ROH and Noah having a very, very, I'd say, positive working exchange between both promotions, sending over guys a fair amount of time. You also
Mm-hmm.
have title changes between the promotions. Most notably, Morishima won the ROH title, right?
That's right.
As well as the Briscoes winning the GHC Junior Tag Team Champions while representing Ring of Honor. And if I'm not also mistaken, Bryan Danielson also won the GHC Junior Heavyweight Championship as well as he was
Yep.
representing Ring of Honor. So, yeah, I do remember right around that time period, Noah is still running pretty hot. They had just
Mm-hmm.
done the big Tokyo Dome show in 2005, and they still had a lot of wow factor to it. A lot of people were still deeply, deeply rooted in, a fair amount of, as you mentioned, 90s All Japan fans definitely went over to Noah to go and see their favorite wrestlers still kind of do their thing, albeit in terms of, you know, seeing the wrestlers, but everybody kind of getting different roles. I mean, Ogawa winning the GHC Heavyweight Championship, and was
I
it
know, in like 6
2002?
minutes, yeah.
Yeah, in 2002, or the fact that the junior heavyweight division is getting a bigger spotlight than
That's right.
anything we'd seen in All Japan, right? This big, sharp left turn in terms of how they had been operating for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
for reasons, of course, but things like that, I do remember the atmosphere in Noah was always that they were always able to pull out some really big gets, right? The Kawada Misawa match that happened right? The
Yeah,
one more
in
time.
'03.
Yeah, that
Mm-hmm.
that was huge. I always felt that was huge for the sake of, just saying, let's go and hit it one more time. That
Oh, I'm
was
sorry. I think that happened later, not '03. I was thinking of the Kobashi match. But yes, you're right. They
it's like
did get the
'05, I
last.
think.
Yeah, yeah. They got the last Misawa Kawada match as well,
Right.
and it kind of put it kind of put like an exclamation point on
Yeah.
the Kings Road era. Just kind of naturally letting it sort of run its course, and whether or not they were able to transition from that, of course, a lot of people will have differing opinions, but I always thought that uh, in the wrestling world as a whole, both Noah and Ring of Honor kind of really represented this idea of being the hot promotions of the 2000s. So it was always kind of cool that they were working together because they both felt like these promotions that were kind of pushing pro wrestling forward, at least in their respective regions.
Right. Yeah, I definitely have to agree with you there. You had lots of talk about ROH at those. I mean, even from the start, right? From the start to about, I don't know, say like, right about the time they were starting to lose guys like, Bobby Fish and Kyle O'Reilly and what's his face? Mr. Super Kicky.
Oh, Adam Cole?
There you go.
Yeah, yeah.
But up until that point, ROH definitely still had, was still a promotion most people talked about in a positive light. But
Mm-hmm.
at that time in 2006, I mean, they really
It
had
was
stuff
something
going
else.
on. Yeah, it really was. It really was something else. So around that time period, right, the Muto All Japan, that's, a very, very different beast from, Misawa, Kobashi, so forth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even they start working with Noah. They had sent over Kea and Muto as a tag team to go and challenge Ogawa and Misawa for the tag belts, right? And if I'm not mistaken, also Kashin, I think, teamed up with Sugiura. Yeah, and he was still an All Japan wrestler, or no, maybe, you know what? Maybe he wasn't with All Japan by that point. Point is you have some All Japan guys working with Noah, right? Something that
Mm-hmm.
either you were like it was gonna happen eventually, or you were just like, I see the bad blood is too thick between the two. But around that time, you see Noah and All Japan cooperating, and to me, that's a mind blowing thing, right? Politically, there's a lot at play, sure, right? Misawa and Muto definitely have a bit of a friendship, right? So if it's up to those two, then it's just, whatever. But, you have other things to consider. People that are ahead of the office, right? The head of what's going on
Mm-hmm.
in the
Yeah.
backstage area, kind of, having to play, head coach or, defensive coordinator up in the stands. But the thing is for me at that time, that era of All Japan, I definitely was not in love with them as much as I was New Japan at that time, right? But I did really have a lot of love for All Japan. But when you have that era of New Japan, which I will still defend to this day is not that bad as people kind of make it out to be, but between that, Noah, and All Japan, those are some really big pieces of the pie that, you're just sort of like, I only have so much time, right? Or you only have so much attention span, so where you're just
Yeah.
like, I can't, and then you still have little promotions that are still kind of hang in there. Osaka Pro Wrestling, Michinoku Pro,
BJW.
BJ. Well, I think BJW were at that point in time, it was like 2006, 2007. They were still doing smaller shows, And
Right.
I think they were not so much focusing on the strong division, right?
No,
Which,
yeah, that came a little later on. They were still
right,
very much a deathmatch promotion,
yeah,
if I'm recalling correctly. Yeah.
right. So, and even then, right, you still got to make a little effort for them, and then if you like hustle, well, shit, right there, you got to make a little time for hustle. I only would take a look at things for storyline wise, and then when Kawada went to go over work hustle, I was just like, I don't really know what to make of this. Really don't know what to make of this because I love Kawada. Kawada and Tendy were my favorites, but they both wind up working hustle, and I'm just like, man, they're putting them in these get-ups, and they're like, boy,
It's
I
a
sure
weird
love money.
place. Yeah, it's a weird place. It's such a strange, fascinating time in Japanese pro wrestling in general. Is the 2000s
Yeah,
because of, just because of uh, all the kind of effects from the All Japan split, just kind of completely restructuring the industry in the country. And I wish I knew more about it. I just kind of have like these broad stroke images of that particular time period. I know bits and pieces about each of the little promotions. But yeah, it's such a fascinating time to kind of look into. And I feel like it was kind of the last time that it felt like there was such a huge shift in the Japanese industry, especially in the 2010s where things are pretty steady all around, like ever since Bushiroad and New Japan kind of took over the kind of discourse and became again the most popular promotion in the country. Things have been pretty steady all around instead of this massive shift that happened in the 2000s with the split from All Japan.
right. Yeah, because that definitely sent shockwaves like all across, not just Japan. I definitely say there was shockwaves felt from even outside. I mean, a big example is Johnny Ace is like, I don't want any part of this. Period.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's not. He's like, I'm not taking sides. I'm just gonna go take this job, WCW. Boom. He's out of there, right? Um, you have also, on the other hand, guys that were intending to stay in the U.S. or in some cases Mexico, but then they wind up working early on in Noah. I'm speaking specifically about Hoovy, right? Hoovy winds up showing up in earlier Noah, not super early
Mm-hmm.
Noah, but Hoovy winds up working in Noah, and he winds up being one of the standouts in the very early forming of the division. I believe he either makes it into the finals of the inaugural tournament to crown the first champion. I think he loses to, was it like Kanemaru? And then he's also in the final for the tag belts, the junior tag belts, a little bit later down the road too, if I'm not mistaken. And it's very interesting that Noah had picked up a fair bit of the lucha libre, not just the influences, but get some of those workers to come over and work in Noah as well. Ricky Marvin, fantastic wrestler for the group. I think he fit in very well. He wrestled there for many, many years, right? You have Hoovy, as I mentioned already, and eventually Super Crazy gets to work over there too, and I believe he's a junior tag champion if I'm not mistaken. And it's just very interesting to me that Noah has just, it has worked with almost every big company that I can think of, and even little companies. It's very interesting. It's the anti All Japan because All Japan was isolationists. The glory days of the 90s of All Japan, they were isolationists, right? For
Sure.
for a
Yeah, but
fair bit of it.
it wasn't. Yeah, but it wasn't always like that. Like even the Mexican ties, there's precedent for that in early All Japan stuff. They used to bring in um, Mil Mascaras to work matches for them. They had, of course, that famous relationship with the AWA. That's why Jumbo was able to have AWA world title runs. The 90s definitely changed them. Like Baba definitely took on new philosophies, business-wise, booking-wise, and I think it was a response to a shifting industry, both locally in Japan and um, worldwide. And he was able he was able to make these decisions. He grew the company into this beloved era where they did fantastic business. They were critically received all around the world. But yeah, all these little things, usually they have some sort of precedent uh, in the past if we dig a little deeper.
Right. Right. No, I was only talking about the 90s in terms of the isolationist period,
Oh,
right?
for sure,
So
yeah.
so so the 70s and the 80s, it's a totally different ball game. As I mentioned, Bruno was working there in the early,
Hmm.
very early All Japan. So it was only up until the 90s that All Japan played nice with, practically everybody else, but then you get to the 90s and then it's isolationist period, right? And that's what is going on at the time of Baba's passing. I mean, sure, they're working with some smaller groups, but it's on a very, very small scale. Some of the battle arts guys, if I'm not mistaken, were already starting to work right around the time Baba's passing, right? And it also, if I'm not mistaken, possibly some Michinoku Pro guys, possibly Hoshikawa, might have been working at that point, possibly.
Well, they also brought in Hayabusa and
Right,
Yuzei
Hayabusa,
Shinzaki for a
that's
few
right.
spells. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're working with other promotions on a very small scale, right?
Yes.
Um, but Noah, on the other hand, they're more like the classic All Japan, where they were working with whoever they could build a good working relationship with, right? And so it's a very interesting shift in dynamic to me, right? Because if Mrs. Baba had her way, it would have just continued looking like how it looked in the 90s. The 2000s would have looked something like how it would have been in the 90s if Mrs. Baba had her way, because that's what she wanted to see. She's just like, stay the course. Just keep doing what we're doing and don't change anything. Misawa, on the other hand, right, was like, I don't see it that way and I don't want to go that road. And so that is a really big change in their fundamental ways of thinking. Moving along, right, we talk about the 2010s, right? We're talking about New Japan and how they've kind of picked themselves back up and they're the top promotion in Japan, right, in terms of box office attendance, and in terms of marketing, in terms of
Hmm.
just stature, right? They're at the top, right?
Right.
So we talk about the 90s All Japan, very critically acclaimed, right? Very much successful on a business scale, right? All Japan has tons of sponsorships, the TV stations firmly behind them. All Japan at that time were not the top promotion in Japan, right? By this
No,
by
no,
this
I
point,
wouldn't say so.
yeah, by this point, New Japan is running Tokyo Dome shows every year, right? And doing
Multiple
it
times a year. Yeah.
right, and they're selling them out like crazy. All Japan
Absolutely.
not willing to go down that road, not willing to go and risk something of that stature, right? So as you've watched these videos, as you've discussed them, as you've analyzed them, as you've looked at them, the matches that you discuss on Walking the King's Road,
Hmm.
would you say that it didn't really matter to them in terms of them being the number one or the number two promotion, but only that they wanted to give the best product wrestling wise that you were going to get in the world? right? Because you had said it earlier. Everybody who has been on the internet that is a wrestling fan will have somebody eventually recommend them All Japan 90s. There's got to be a reason why, right? There's got to be a reason why, because if you look at like 80s New Japan, right, which is a great
Hmm.
product, but it definitely is, it doesn't get revered. It doesn't get discussed enough. It doesn't get tons and tons of people talking about it on a daily basis, right? I mean,
Hmm.
possibly in the 2000s. I definitely want to say in the 2000s that was something I feel was a bigger a bigger piece of the conversation, was how the 80s New Japan really kind of changed things, right? Do you think that that's possibly the mindset that these guys have, where they're like, we don't care that we're number two to New Japan, right? We're just going to go out there and we're going to just give the best wrestling product that you can get in the world.
Well, I think what it was is that Baba had basically cornered his market. Like he had found uh basically he had found an audience who was fully bought in to what he was selling, and he just stayed the course. Like it was a very conservative move when it comes to mid to late 90s, in the sense that 1990 Baba is forced to do something new because Tenryu leaves the company. He brings a bunch of people with him, and he has no one to throw up against Jumbo. So he has Misawa unmasked. He has Misawa beat Jumbo in Budokan Hall. And when he sees that, the crowd, they are completely bought into Misawa. They're buying troves of Misawa's merchandise. They went crazy when Misawa beat Jumbo. Jumbo was like, okay, this is it. We found the thing. We found the next guy, and we're just gonna ride this train until the wheels fall off. And Baba was just like, this is it. We're just gonna keep going with this particular thing. And again, the next time he was forced to do something kind of forward thinking and kind of push the boundaries a little bit more, was because his hand was forced. Jumbo gets sick. Jumbo gets sick. He can't be the guy anymore. So put the belt on Misawa. Now we're gonna have Kawada be the opposition, that antagonist to Misawa, and from there it's again, we're just gonna ride this until the wheels fall off. Kawada's not gonna beat him for years. We're gonna tease you with that payoff for years and years and years, and we're not gonna give it to you until we sell out a huge venue like the Tokyo Dome, when they finally did run the dome. So uh, I don't think it was specifically, we're just going to put on the best wrestling product that we can. Of course, every kind of promotion, any kind of promoter is going to think that they're doing that. They're going to believe in their product. They're going to try to make it as great a product as they can. But for Baba, it was very much, we found our space. We're successful in this space. There's no need to kind of rock the boat. We're just going to keep selling out Budokan Hall however many times in a row that they did in the 90s. Like, there was a whole stretch where they never they sold out every seat in Budokan Hall that they offered for years on end. And Baba was just like, this is where the business is at. This is the kind of level that we've always wanted to reach. There's no need to have our eyes be bigger than our stomachs. We're just going to hold the course and keep going with it.
We interviewed Tai Okea, and he had mentioned that Budokan was his favorite venue, and I was also telling him about how in certain wrestling games like Virtual Pro Wrestling 2, you get the full experience. Like if you were like at an All Japan show, if you get a 2 count, you hear the oh, the crowd going, and then it sounds like fans stomping, like how they stomp to
Oh,
show
yeah, and
yeah.
then sometimes you'll see the hard cam shake. That's
Yeah,
wild.
yeah, yeah. So I was telling Kay about that because that's definitely a part of the feel at Budokan, right? When they were hot there, right, selling out
Hmm.
every show like you're talking about, and I really hope one day that All Japan can get back there to running Budokan on a regular basis. I really hope that for them because they've got a talented group of guys, and I think they have a really good youth movement right now. And so I'm really hoping that the they can build those guys up to be, big stars, and very good wrestlers. At the very least, you want to be able to have a group of rookies like you have with and Hokuto, Dan Tamura, and as well as Atsuki, because those were some of the last rookies that Aoki worked with, and they are outstanding wrestlers. And it's a real shame that they lost Aoki in terms of he was so pivotal to a lot of things backstage, and obviously him leaving was a big thing for Jun to consider before he left to go work in DDT, and the rest is history. So it's back to mid 90s. It's back to All Japan, right?
Hmm.
You have Kawada and Taue. You have Kobashi and Misawa until you know, uh, I think was it Misawa starts working with Uncle June, right?
Right.
And you have these legendary. They're like arcs, right? Like it's you could look at it as just like a character arc, right? But in terms of the relationships that they all have with each other, Misawa to Kawada, right? And
Hmm.
I think content like yours helps to get people to appreciate the little things or the nuances that some things that maybe they've seen and they kind of just gloss over little things, but you are able to shift the focus back and put a magnifying glass on it and be able to say, you know, take a deeper look into these things. And that sort of stuff is something I think we need more of, like out there, because there's just so much like negativity. I mean, on social media in terms of just you can't just be a wrestling fan anymore and enjoy what you want to enjoy and just say it without any kind of fear of somebody kind of being a troll about it, or just trying to give you guff because you enjoy this promotion or that promotion. It's gotten fairly toxic out there, but I feel like content like what you produce, and hopefully for what we put out as well, it's positive stuff, right? We try our best collectively in the All Japan Worldwide Fan Group to be positive in terms of we're here to talk about something that makes us happy rather
Hmm.
than let's all talk a bunch of nonsense about, what I don't like about DDT, New Japan, or any of the Joshi leagues as well. It's like we just want to keep it being positive and talking positive about all Japan related stuff, right? Because it's a very toxic environment out there, and I really try really hope that we do not feed it because it's totally okay to have differing opinions, and it's even better if folks can talk about it at length without getting hostile or taking it personal, right? Um, that's something that needs to stay important, and the more positive I think we kind of focus on these things, that I think a lot of people would really enjoy as a pro wrestling fan, not just a Japanese pro wrestling fan, but as a wrestling fan in general. If you were just getting into pro wrestling and maybe you caught a whiff of some early All Japan and now you want to know more, check out the Walking the King's Road and you get just what you're looking for. You know, I feel. And it's awesome that there is so much content out there that is positive, that you listen to it and it's not a lot of negativity. We definitely, myself and Matt, the co-host, we definitely disagree on certain things, but we never get, you know, hostile or, malicious with each other, because at the end of the day, it's his opinion, and it's no better than mine, and my opinion is no better than his. But we all just want to enjoy, and stuff like what you have on your channels with the year in review in wrestling, as well as Walking the King's Road. It's positive stuff. It will make you feel good after you've gotten done watching it and enjoying it, because you're not just enriching your mind, you're enriching your heart, because if you're a true wrestling fan, then this kind of stuff hits you in the feels, right? I love wrestling history. I really, really do. I'm a huge wrestling history nerd, and
Hmm.
wherever you can get it, and it's credible, obviously. And it's positive, right? Not meaning to, go and, chastise or downplay, anything else. Just say, this is what we are going to talk about, and this is what's going on at the time on the subject, laser focused. I think people definitely appreciate that. They really do. Um, I don't know if you check out social media a fair amount, but like definitely on Twitter, it's just like it's become very negative, and I think it's terrible. People are definitely always going to be jerks, sure, but I think that you just have to try to stay positive, and at the same time just common decency, treat people the way you would want to be treated. Somebody says, oh, I love Kenny Omega and AEW. It's like, well, that's not really hurting you. That's not really bothering you. People are going to enjoy all the different flavors of wrestling out there at the time. It was happening in the 90s, and it's happening now. Variety is the spice of life. I really want to say thank you for coming on and talking with us about the show. Is there anything new that you've got cooking up for either your year in wrestling or Walking the King's Road?
I'm taking a little break from the King's Road stuff. The last video was a pretty major one. It was the Rise of the Holy Demon Army,
Hmm.
and that essentially covered all of 93. That was kind of the biggest arc in 1993. Everyone who knows All Japan history in the 90s can guess what's coming. 1994 is a huge year in All Japan's history in terms of the matches that happen, the kind of major character arcs that sort of get resolved and continue in 1994. So I don't think I need to say too much about that, because if you know your history, you know the chronology, then you know what's coming in 94, and you can understand the kind of massive undertaking that will be. I really want to do that justice. I really want to pick it apart as thoroughly as I can. So down the line, I will be doing my watch research for 1994, and it's a couple of really big years in All Japan that I'm about to hit. Like there's a good chance that I'm gonna do the research for 94 to 95 together, and there's even a decent chance that I'm gonna go straight through 96 as well, just watch it all together and then release the videos as I finish them, just because so much of it is so interconnected and so kind of monumental in pro wrestling history that I really want to take the time to get it right. Before that, though, I am currently working on a new project for the channel that I haven't announced publicly yet, but I'll give a few hints. I'll say that it is a wrestler-centric one. So it is a project centered on a single worker, and I'm going through kind of their matches from a certain time period at this point. I'm about a fifth or a sixth of the way through that particular research. And I've also recently been doing a lot of, I've been lucky enough to be able to do some freelance writing for fanbyte.com. My most recent article was talking about Jushin Liger versus Brian Pillman in December of 1991, and it was a very funny fan cam piece of footage where you can accidentally hear the cameraman, and they're talking like they're on Twitter in 2021, and it's hilarious. It's such a great piece of footage. It warms my heart. Like, some people will say it ruins the match. I think it makes it 10 times better, so I highly recommend everyone check that out. I have a few more things that are in the works for Fanbyte, and I think the next thing that I'll be working for them will be of particular interest to everyone listening to this podcast and everyone on the All Japan fan page over on Facebook. That's all I'll say about that. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff, a lot of fun stuff that I'm really looking forward to getting to. If you've been following my 1990s project, the year in review, then you'll know that 1992 is up next. And that's a really fascinating year in pro wrestling as a whole, all over the globe. It's also a huge year for All Japan, with Misawa finally taking the title, Jumbo getting sick. It's a huge point in the company's history where they're sort of forced to transition into this road of, okay, Misawa's the guy, Jumbo's not here, there's no chance anymore to hedge our bets. It's Misawa, full steam ahead. And I think that's a really fascinating year. It's been interesting doing the 1990s project, of course, because I've named All Japan as my promotion of the year 2 years in a row, 1990 and 1991. I think there's a shot of them maybe losing it in 1992, just because I'm not a huge fan of Stan Hansen's Triple Crown reign that year. I think it's a bit up and down, especially since he spent so much of it wrestling Misawa. And I don't know. I think there's a chance that a different promotion can be promotion of the year in 1992. Maybe WCW. I'm not sure. It's a really interesting kind of problem for a content creator like me to have, where I'm worried the lists will become too predictable. Like, everyone knows that the 90s was All Japan's time, that's just a thing that's known. So I'm always kind of hopeful for something to knock them off the pedestal, just because it'd be more interesting to discuss and view as content if I'm able to say, well, All Japan was great, we all know that, but here's the thing we all, or most people, overlooked. We'll see. That's the joy of doing this project for me, is questioning what I think I knew about wrestling, sort of just examining what I discover, and just forming my own thoughts about these time periods that have been so well discussed, so analyzed and talked about through the years, and just kind of pushing everything else aside, just seeing it for myself. It is such a rewarding experience, and I cannot recommend it enough to people who love wrestling history, to anyone who wants to know more about wrestling. The main thing I'll tell them is that there are so many things in your head that you think you know, but you've never actually experienced. And going out of your way to experience them for yourself will do wonders for your wrestling fandom. You will discover so much, and you will enrich what you thought you knew. You will find out things that you didn't know, and it's truly one of the best experiences you can have as a wrestling fan, is to just go out of your way and see stuff. And if you like it, excellent. If you don't like it, now you can say you don't like it because you watched it, you know why you don't like it. Yeah, I think it all comes back to that. I've kind of said this before. Curiosity is the wrestling fan's best friend, and following that will only make your time discussing and consuming this art form all the better.
Well said. Now, one last question. We were talking about Hansen's Triple Crown title reign. Was it 92 you said? Or is it 93?
92, because Misawa holds the belt for 92 to 94. So
right.
He has it all through 93. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So Hansen had been, less than a year and a half removed from working in WCW, right? He was working the program with Luger, and
That's
he
right.
was U.S. champ and all that. And you know, you'd been watching a fair amount of Hansen of the time period. I was curious if you'd watched anything of when he was in WCW in, I think it's like, what, 90 and 91.
I have actually. I've seen the Luger matches. Um, they're they're pretty good. You know, I don't. They're not anything to write home about. I'm not gonna say you gotta see them. But you know, they're pretty good. They do what they need to do. There was an interesting bit in '91 where WCW ran back Hansen versus Vader on pay-per-view, where they were like, "Oh, the most violent match in Japanese history. We're bringing it here to WCW," and then it ends in like a double count out or something. You know, some random non-finish. So yeah, Hansen has some interesting stuff in America at around this time period. I do think the Luger feud is probably the best of it, at least from the things that I've seen that he did in America. The Vader match, just stick to the New Japan matches if you're interested in that feud. But yeah, he had some fun stuff with Luger. I think the best one they did, I believe they did a bull rope match, the one where you have to touch all four corners. I particularly enjoyed that. I think that was at like Starrcade 1990 or something. That was very good.
Reason why I bring this up is because I've always felt that when Hansen is working All Japan, late 80s, and then he shows up WCW, right, early 90s, right, it's like his work kind of took a hit, right?
Sure.
When he got back into
Hmm.
working for All Japan full time, I kind of felt like his work had taken a hit. You know, working over in WCW kind of, you know, I don't want to be too critical. It's just it's always something that I've kind of held, you know, personally, right? Because I love Stan, right? The guy is one of the best, right? But I definitely feel like him going to WCW was, I mean, it was something he maybe should have avoided. But that's, you know, woulda, coulda, shoulda. But always deep down, you know, I looked at the work from when he's in there in All Japan, right before he takes off WCW, got see some of those WCW matches, and then he gets back to All Japan. It's just sort of like, you know, it seems like, you know, he maybe lost a step, or maybe he's not hitting it so hard. It could just be that he's getting older too. You know, it's true, but
I think they're all factors. I couldn't tell you for sure if it was WCW, because so much of my research has been 1990 moving forward. I'm already seeing him kind of in the middle of that time, and I've definitely noticed the problem that you're talking about.
yeah,
Stan Hansen is in the early 90s, and it looks like moving forward, he's a very inconsistent worker. You're gonna either get just this wild, crazy, energetic classic, right? Like he has with Kawada, he has with Kobashi a bunch of times, just these top level matches that everyone's gonna talk about for decades, right? And then you're just gonna get just let's be honest, you're gonna get some stinkers. Like the
yeah,
dude had some stinkers in early 90s All Japan. He had what I believe was the worst Triple Crown match I'd watched for the project. It was against Misawa in 93,
uh huh,
October 93, where it ends in like a weird sunset flip roll-up where it doesn't look like it was supposed to be the finish, and everyone's confused, and it was just not a great match before that anyway. So yeah, there's something up there with Hansen. I believe if I before I make like a kind of sort of definitive take on it, on what caused it or what I believe caused it, I
okay,
think I'd have to dig into his 80s stuff more, because I've definitely seen the peaks of his 80s stuff. I've seen the stuff against Funk, you know, I've seen the stuff against Tenryu, which was really beloved
yeah,
at the time and which I really enjoy as well.
yeah,
And so in my head, he's still, you know, one of the best in the 80s. Even going back into the 70s, I've seen the match with like Andre and stuff where it's absolutely fantastic. But if I had to sit down and watch like 12 months worth of Stan Hansen in the 80s, maybe that changes. Maybe I find those other not so great efforts that I'm seeing in the 90s because I'm forcing myself to be exposed to it. So
True,
it's
no.
either he's getting older and he kind of discovered let's say shortcuts, or just kind of leaned on his star power, his kind of position in the company a bit more to kind of get across to the fans. Um, or maybe, there's a chance he might have always been this way, where he shows up when it's time to go, when he has a opponent that he's happy to be working with. Like everything I've seen, he wasn't really clicking with Misawa. But when he's working with Kawada, it's magical. When he's working with Kobashi, it's magical. So
Yeah.
maybe he's just one of those guys where he really needed to click with someone, and maybe he just liked to take it easy on some shows. There's tons of workers like that,
Yeah.
and that's just a reality of time, a reality of the business.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, um, is there anything you'd like to plug? I mean, can you people just type in, they go to your YouTube, or they go to your YouTube. If they go to YouTube and they just type in your name and Walking the King's Road to be able to find you, pretty easy.
Yep. Yep, that's right. It's Joseph Montecillo on YouTube. Go on over there, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all those different things. If you want to see me on Twitter, where I kind of talk about a bit of a wider spread of wrestling, because I keep up with a lot of current day wrestling. That's me at Joseph Weirdness on Twitter. So check me out on all of those. Check out my stuff on fanbyte.com. There's a lot of great wrestling writing on there as well from a bunch of different writers. So I highly recommend that as well. And yeah, that's how you can find me. That's how you can check out my stuff.
Fantastic. Okay. Hey, Joseph, we're going to have you come back on and maybe go a little bit more in depth, about these things in all Japan that I definitely feel like you and I would have some really good discourse about, like the aforementioned Hansen thing, because, I feel as though Kawada is somebody that I think that if I had been exposed to him when I was younger, I probably would have been an even bigger fan than I am now, just because he is, like, to me, he is one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. I mean, a lot of
Easily. Yeah,
people do talk about
easily.
Misawa, and Misawa, without a doubt, is a great equal. But for me, it was always Kawada. And, one of these days, I would love to talk Kawada with you and kind of go from, looking at, the Footloose days to, eventually getting the black and yellow and starting to just kick people in the face. And then eventually he gets to team with Taue, and it's like the rest is history. And
For sure.
creating one of the greatest, just his All Japan run in the 90s. It's just, for me, it's like mandatory viewing. You
Oh,
gotta
it's
see it.
insane.
Yeah.
It's insane. And I'll say this about Kawada, right? Like we can have a different time to go more in depth, but I'll say this. For people who have seen my 1991 video, they already know this, but um, by the time 1991 is over, at the end of 1991, Toshiaki Kawada is the best wrestler in the world. And it'll be tough for anyone to kind of take that from him,
Yeah.
because at the end of 91, he's the best there is anywhere in the world. And what a decade he has after that. So
Yeah.
crazy, crazy.
Yeah. There's just something about him that, when I first started watching his 90s stuff, later 90s stuff, personally, um, that it was just like this guy is like the bomb. I mean, Taue too is, nothing to ignore. Believe me, he's one of the most talented, big men in pro wrestling, right? He really is dynamic.
He's amazing.
Yeah, he really is. But for me, it was always Kawada. And so one of these days, we're gonna have another one of these, and we can talk Kawada. But until then, we want to say again, thank you so much, Joseph, for coming on. I've been doing some talking with some of you, and also with some folks that are also in the Japanese pro wrestling English community that might have some more insight than others solely because they're chasing after it. But Nozawa has not worked a GLEAT appearance in some time. In fact, I want to say it's several months. And one has to wonder, we haven't seen any Noah participation in GLEAT. However, we have seen All Japan participation in the last couple of months and consistent participation. We see Iwamoto going to win over Masaoka. We would eventually get announced a six-man tag with Iwamoto teaming up with two other All Japan wrestlers to take on, I think it's Sima, Hayashi, and Minato Tanaka. We'll talk about that next month, but it's the fact that GLEAT is starting to invest some time and energy and money into promoting All Japan. And I believe this relationship can only help both sides. Not to mention that a fair amount of the GLEAT wrestlers, the GLEAT talent of the men division, have exposure to All Japan. They have experience in All Japan, even if it's been in previous eras, the Muto era or the Shirashi era. These wrestlers still have a link to All Japan's past. And by them showing up and by representing the past of All Japan while at the same time representing GLEAT can only be a good thing. Heritage in pro wrestling, I feel, is a very critical thing to embrace and to learn about, because it's just cool. I guess maybe it's just the nerd in me, but I think it's really cool to understand the stuff that kind of came a generation or two before that. Yes, we can argue that Dynamite Kid was a bad person. However, the work that he established, his body of work, though, cannot be disputed in any way, shape, or form because he's revolutionary. The man broke all sorts of glass ceilings because he couldn't take no for an answer. And he put himself in a very bad position, very bad situation. But at the end of the day, he is still a legend. He is still the guy who really transcended junior heavyweight wrestling and inspired a whole wave of wrestlers to kind of follow suit. Anyways, this GLEAT All Japan relationship, if they can nurture it, I think will be something that could really help both sides. GLEAT is a young entity. It has a good collection of talent. That talent could easily be showcased in All Japan, and All Japan by that would grow and gain bigger audience, and more people would want to check out their product. Not to mention, it creates fresh matchups. I was just talking with Mr. Jonathan Foyer, if I'm pronouncing his last name right, and just mentioning about, potential teams for upcoming Real World Tag League, and I don't think it's too far-fetched to think that maybe we could see, there's a possibility we may see Lindemann and possibly T-Hawk because they've been teaming, but I would rather see T-Hawk and Onitsuka because they're a bigger team, they're a larger team, and that would kind of work a bit more for Real World Tag League. But think about this. Hayato Tamura in the Real World Tag League. How about that? Guy is a stud. He's a great wrestler. He's got it. He's got the size. He's got the tools. Great wrestler. You can't not want to get this guy on your side, even if for just for tournaments. So I think if you're All Japan, you got to go and say, hey, I'll send over Purple Haze for some tag title action. All in all, GLEAT and All Japan working together would be only a good thing. They need to keep up with this. They need to keep with their working relationship, no matter what. Both sides benefiting from this relationship. And that about closes it up for this episode of SUWAMA'S Station. I want to thank you folks for listening in. As I mentioned, Matt will be back with us next episode, and we are very much looking forward to bringing you what's been going on for September. All of September's going on, results, news, and as we do our normal thing. So we want to say thank you so much. We want to give a big shout out to Chairshot Radio Network. We're hoping you're checking us out on Spotify, and we really hope that you're sharing and telling other folks about us, because that's how the show thrives, is word of mouth. And we really appreciate those who are sticking with us and enjoying the show. We want to also give a really big shout out to Pudo Love, Striga, Sternness, all the folks at Cage Match. We want to say thank you. We really appreciate you and all your work, because without you, the show gets infinitely harder. And again, we don't want to take any credit for results, for the information that we use. We straight up take it from them, and we want to give them all the accolades and all the credit that they deserve, because they're doing the Lord's work. And with that having been said, we are going to close out, and we hope that you are subscribed to our YouTube channel and you're checking us out, checking out all the good stuff that we do, the English commentary, the interviews. We hope you're checking out the podcast. You're also on the Facebook group, facebook.com/AJPW Worldwide Fan Group. We are out of time. We will be back. Until then, take care. Blue Justice.